what I did was I created a list of the 10 most important years in junior heavyweight history. Define important however you want. For me, it is an incredible in-ring year. It is box office success, and it is influence. And I will have the asterisk that, despite my love of junior heavyweight wrestling, and despite the fact that I do consider myself to have a pretty strong historical grasp on this topic, Tiger Mask and Dynamite Kid do remain somewhat of a blind spot for me, and I wasn't comfortable singling out a certain year. And for some guys, they just don't have a singular year that defined them and defined wrestling. So I couldn't tell between, 80, 81, 82 with Tiger Mask and Dynamite Kid if there's a particular year that jumped out. If there is, and there's a glaring omission on my behalf, please let me know. Mike, I'm going to go through this list all at once, and then give me your thoughts. Am I forgetting anybody obvious? Is there anybody that you strongly disagree with? I want to break this down a little bit. The most important years in junior heavyweight wrestling history, I would have the Great Sasuke's 1994 at number 1. We've talked at length about that. I think we're all familiar with what that year was now. I would have Ricochet's 2014 at number 2. This is a favorite topic of yours and mine. If you weren't there in 2014, it is hard to explain for a guy that was wrestling in the number 2 Japanese promotion, was being pulled off of indie bookings due to a mysterious wrestling show on the El Rey Network, as we were all Googling what the El Rey Network was, and was working for a depressed Gabe Sapolsky and a DVD-only PWG product. It is hard to explain the gravitational pull that this guy had. Wherever Ricochet went, it mattered. It felt like, at the time, the gold standard of pro wrestling and the gold standard of junior heavyweight wrestling. It's one of the most impressive years I've ever seen. Will Ospreay's... Yeah. I'm gonna go through this list one by one, and then... Actually, you know what? No, I'm not. Give me your thoughts on Ricochet's 2014. I'm doing a bad job here. You go.
No, the one thing I would add is, like, that a lot like Sasuke's 94, I think that it's the fact that it's not just one promotion that's happening, and he becomes the first foreigner ever to win the Open the Dream Gate title the same year that he wins Best of the Super Junior. The same year he wins Battle of Los Angeles, he becomes Lucha Underground champion immediately, and Open the Freedom Gate champion at the same time for Gabe Sapolsky. So you have someone that I've just rattled off essentially 4 different promotions at the same time. They anointed him the guy, and they decided to let him go to the races with him. And that's just something that no one else has done to a certain level, I would say, other than Sasuke 94. So I'm with you on that.
Will Ospreay's 2019, his Super Juniors run that year is perhaps the single greatest tournament run we've ever seen. I think I had all but one of his matches at 4 stars or higher. Most people had all of his tournament matches at 4 stars or higher, and then the finals versus Shingo, which is one of the finer wrestling matches I've ever seen. This was years and years of Ospreay being the guy that was too flippy on the UK indie scene into being this incredibly polarizing figure for fair or unfair reasons in New Japan, putting it all together. And this is the start of me feeling a way about Ospreay's work, where while he's not a perfect wrestler and he even does things that annoy me, I do find there to be an objective greatness to Ospreay in 2019, in the same way that there's an objective greatness to Hashimoto in 1994, and the same way that there's an objective greatness to Kobashi in 2003. This is where that era of Will's career starts for me. And then the second half of the year, he's a heavyweight. But his first half of 2019 is so impressive that I have him at number 3 on this list.
Yeah, and I think that versus the other 2, Ospreay is someone that you kind of, more so than I would say Sasuke and Ricochet in those given years. By the end of 2019, you see someone enter his prime. Sasuke's already in his prime in 1994. Ricochet, I think we could say, probably starts really in earnest in 2011 at the end of the Pac feud for him. And I would say that, like, the maturation that happens because of that Best of the Super Junior and him then going heavyweight afterwards, this is the first time you kind of see someone super incredible junior heavyweight year kind of spur them into what we would consider their active prime.
Yeah, because Sasuke's coming out of his peak as we enter 1995. We never have it as good as we did in 94. Ricochet, for my taste, that peak is 2011 through 2014. If you wanted to extend that timeline to 2016, I wouldn't argue. But for my taste and what I like out of Ricochet, 2015, 2016 are just a slight step down from the work they had been doing. Whereas Ospreay, again, I said it after the Danielson match in 2024, where I just said, I think if you don't like this guy, I think you're fucking wrong. Like, I think it's the same thing as saying you don't like Masawa, you don't like Santo, you don't like Negro Casas. It's the same fucking thing with Ospreay, and people still aren't there for whatever reason.
I think that's just going to be something that with the guy that's just going to hang on his neck, like throughout the remainder of his career, and afterwards there will be the people that will just not be able to see how he's changed in a career, so I sadly I think it's just going to be a thing that's just going to forever be around that guy.
Number 4, I have Rey Mysterio Jr. in 1995. This is when he becomes the workhorse of the AAA roster. You start to see him integrate himself into the United States, and then you also have the all-important Psychosis match, the non-tournament match from J-Cup 95 at the end of the year as well. There's a few different Rey years that I could have chosen. I think 1996, given his WCW work, could have been very applicable here. I also think 2002, given his SmackDown work, could have been in the running, but 1995 was the year that I landed on for Rey Mysterio.
Ray is, I think, the first person on this list where you have the struggle of which year to choose from, because like 96 would have been the one, just because I think that, especially for like how just like genre breaking he was as a wrestler on national TV in 96. Like, I feel like that it's just completely different from after Ray in 1996. But 1995, especially like the ECW stuff and AAA and Psychosis, I see your point here with him for his 95.
I feel like as time has gone on, the 95 year is cited just a tad more than 96, perhaps because of the work in Mexico being a little bit deeper than it was in 1996, the ECW stuff being as fondly thought of as it is. So that's where I lean there. Another person where you could pick multiple years, and I would certainly hear you out, is Jushin Thunder Liger. I have his 1994 listed for all the reasons we talked about above.
Yeah, I think like as we've kind of re-explored is like, so some of at least where it crossed in with Michinoku Pro, his 1994 stuff, like, man, maybe like I do have a certain enjoyment of heel Liger. Heel Liger might be my favorite
God, yeah.
Liger.
Look, if you were gonna say just on a level of like, hey, I enjoy 2003 Jushin Thunder Liger killing people in Pro Wrestling Noah more than I like J-Cup Liger in 1994. Me too. I'm right there with you. I think 1994 is the more important year than any of the heel Liger years or any of the heel Liger invasions of, Osaka Pro, Noah, later on Dragon Gate. That stuff not as good as some of the rest of it. But yeah. I think 1994 is his magnum opus, even if, again, personally, there's Liger years that I like more than 1994.
No, I agree with you on this. Yeah.
I feel like the back half of this list is very controversial, especially for people that aren't you. I think you might agree with me more on the rest of these than anybody else listening. But number 6, I have...
Well, there's one name that I know you're going to get to that I would probably have right after them that you have super low, but okay.
Interesting. I can't wait to get there, because I would have at number 6, I would have Pac's 2011. Long-time Open the Voice Gate listeners know the drill here. All of Ricochet's success, including his 2014 year, is because he spent the entire year of 2011 wrestling Pac. Pac made him the wrestler that he is today. It is where he has the greatest Open the Brave Gate run of all time. He's a part of the greatest Open the Twin Gate match of all time, if not the second greatest, but him and Dragon Kid versus Shima and Ricochet at Kobe World that year. He's the MVP of Dragon Gate USA. And then the other thing that I was thinking about, his 2011 is so good that it paves the way for what is a completely insane 2012 that I actually think we underrate, where he starts the year on that Dragon Gate USA show having the match he had with Tozawa. And then he's involved in that
which kind of was Tozawa's coming out party in DG USA.
They've got the match in Atlanta, and then they have the rematch
Oh,
in
I was
San
thinking about the
Francisco.
Atlanta. I
Yeah,
was thinking
because
about the Atlanta one. Yeah,
that one
you're
happens
right.
just a little bit before. But his 2012 is completely insane. He's got the match with Tozawa in San Francisco, which is a really high level match. That weekend, he also has the PWG show where it's Generico, Super Dragon, and Pac against Steen, Yoshino, and oh god, I'm gonna have to look it up here. It's Generico, Yoshino, and Pac versus Tozawa, Steen, and Super Dragon, which
Yeah,
is actually one of the best matches of 2012. It takes place not in Reseda. This is when they were still teaming with the Wrestle Reunion team, and so it
yeah. This
happens.
was Kurt Russell reunion. I think too was the show.
Three. This was the last one they
3.
did,
Okay.
and it's devastating because it's the wrong crowd. The crowd is into it, but if this match happens in Reseda, it's a 5-star match. We look at it as one of the greatest trios matches of all time, and it just
Everyone finally recognizes that the PWG boom actually starts with Akira Tozawa. Yeah,
yes,
yeah. No, I'm with you.
Preach to the choir there, and then he's got, so in one weekend he's got the Tozawa match and that 6-man tag. WrestleMania weekend that year, he has a singles match against Low-Ki, and then what I've always said is the most underrated Dragon Gate USA match of all time, which was Low-Ki, Tozawa, and Hulk versus Mochizuki, Pac, and Ricochet, a near 5-star match. He then goes to the Super Juniors tournament. Oh, he's got a Dream Gate match with Shima that's one of the best singles matches of Shima's career, one of my favorite Dream Gate matches of all time. He's got that in March. He then goes to the Super Juniors tournament where he's got the match against Devitt that gets him signed to WWE. It's unfucking believable how good that match is. And then he closes out his summer in Dragon Gate because he leaves in July with his final match is Yoshino Doi and Pac against Hulk, Cyber Kong, and Naoki Tanizaki, and Don Fujigama and Masaki Mochizuki, which is a tremendous 3-way trios match. That's at the end of July when he gets signed. And so because 2012 historically has always been a weird year for Dragon Gate footage where we just have a little bit less from that year than we do other years. And then also, he largely disappears for the back half of 2012 because he's moving to Largo and helping start NXT essentially, because he was never an FCW guy. He starts in NXT at Full Sail. His 2012 is completely insane. I know 2011 is the thing listed here, but I did want to mention that really quickly.
Yeah, maybe one of the most ridiculous 6 months of someone on the wrestling scene, and then just completely gets mothballed until they stop running the former Winn-Dixie in Tampa.
And it's not like he was bad at NXT. There's nothing from the back half of 2012 that particularly sticks out in my mind. But I was just thinking about that today. I was like, God, his 2011, you and I recognize as this historically great junior heavyweight year. But if he would have just finished out the Dragon Gate schedule in 2012 and then worked like the Super Junior Tag League with Devitt or whoever at the end of that year, his 2012 might have ended up being better.
Yeah, no, it could have been the same, because like he ends up being in that like era that I want to say I remember seeing his photo on the FCW website, but he never made TV. But like it took a while to get like that sheen off of guys who were in FCW and NXT kind of coming along. And then, I mean, by the end of 2013, it's 2014, he becomes like one of the linchpins of the network launch with the NXT Arrival shows.
An overwhelming success everywhere he's ever worked. And I always just want to note that about Pac, that I still don't really think he gets the credit for that. For when he was on the main roster, he was the best television wrestler in the world. And I think there was a point in AEW where he was probably as good as anybody on TV. That is number 6. Number 7, I have Low-Ki in 2002. As we talk about seismic shifts in wrestling, big sweeping changes, stylistic shifts, it never really came to fruition. But when you watch 2002 Low-Ki, whether it's in Jersey All Pro or whether it's in Ring of Honor, it's like this nucleus is forming of change that just never quite gets there. But it does feel like there is an alternate reality in which 2002 Low-Ki dramatically shapes the entire wrestling industry.
Yeah, and I mean, he's an interesting person to bring up here, because he really, like, I think you set him up and you put him into different eras, and you might end up having the 1994 Sabu or 1994 Great Sasuke, and you get like, oh no, Loki came and everything kind of changed.
Mhm.
And it definitely felt like there was always like that, is Loki going to be like the one, because 2002 is especially, but even getting into the start of his TNA time, like there was always the chance of like, oh, maybe if Loki gets on national TV, pro wrestling completely changes. Like he had that kind of energy in the way that I think we now recognize Sasuke and Sabu had in '94, but it just never gets acted on, and it just stays in like that nucleus and does. And in a lot of ways, like he's the one that kind of is, I think, greatly kind of marginalized out of that era, and especially when you think about like Jersey All Pro and beginning days of Ring of Honor, for probably his personality and his decision making. Like he's the one that doesn't get kind of talked about. And if you like follow at least 2025 AEW, Loki's not even a part of the narrative for Ring of Honor in 2002. When you consider like how important Loki was for that promotion in 2002 at the same time.
You and I were talking earlier about how in the specifics of 1994, ECW is Sabu and Michinoku Pro is the Great Sasuke. 2002 Ring of Honor is Loki. I think we just now, unfortunately, time has gone on to a point where we have the historical precedent to say that it doesn't, he leaves Ring of Honor for 0-1 in 2003. And then in 2004, there's just, it becomes a mess essentially once the calendar flips over into 2003. And I think we are unfortunately living in, you do this with basketball players sometimes where, their career was the worst version we would have got out of 100 versions of that career. And whereas you have this shining star in Sasuke where you see junior heavyweights continue to be influenced by the way that he approached wrestling, and you see Sabu's influence in every aspect of wrestling, almost too much with all of the redundant table spots there are now. Loki feels like the spiritual successor to them, but he doesn't have any of that influence. And that's a shame, because for as much of a headache as he is, I've said for years, I think wrestling would be better with more people that took it as seriously as Loki than not. And we're living in the not now. And I said this about a year ago. I rewatched Loki versus Samoa Joe from Ring of Honor, the 2002 match. And I made the point, I go, I think if this match happened now, I think if this match happened on like a deadlock show, I don't think it would get over the way that it did in 2002. I think a lot of people would like it. I also think a lot of people would be uncomfortable by how physical and how serious, for lack of a better term, that match was. And, 2002 Loki feels just like something of a complete bygone era now.
Yeah, I mean, like even if you think about like where he, like coming off of like the Super 8 win in 2001, Jersey All Pro in 2002 is like at its kind of peak. It just like it does not like hold up. And I think if anything, what is held up,
do you think his in-ring work doesn't hold up?
Or I think his legacy doesn't.
His legacy doesn't. I think his in-ring work holds up to an astonishing degree.
No. I will watch Loki take liberties with someone in a wrestling match. I will take, if that was happening on Dynamite every week, Case, I would actually have more than a feeling of overwhelming apathy towards that promotion. But like I think almost in a lot of ways, his legacy is now more seen through his TNA period than it does for being like the inaugural Ring of Honor champion and all of that. Like it's the time with Triple X and the X Division, and the teams with Daniels and Skipper, I feel like, are kind of the thing that he kind of gets remembered for. And that's just, when you think about like him in TNA, like that's such a long time ago. You're talking about his run in 2002 through 2004. So yeah, you're talking about this time.
If you've never seen Loki versus AJ Styles from the ROH Night of Appreciation show, this is April of 2002, I tell you, you are in for a treat. Yeah, pause this podcast to go find that match. It's unbelievable. So I think we're on the same page with Loki there. I have Mystico's 2006 at number 8. Felt like I needed a luchador. Was unsure of what to do with a lot of luchadors, because I don't feel like Santo is a junior and Negro Casas is a junior in Japan, but it almost felt wrong. And I don't even love this pick for me, but it's when he won Flair Fest. He's got the Black Warrior match that year. I love his 2005 in ring. I love his 2006 in ring. I landed on 2006 here mainly because of the Flair Thez.
Yeah.
If you're a lucha head that is annoyed by this, tell me why, because I think I annoyed myself with this pick. It felt like I had to have a luchador in there, but I wasn't confident with any of my selections here. So I went with Mystico 2006.
Yeah, and I think when you like think about like business wise, like especially Mystico being like so much of a lighter weight class wrestler versus like you like were there like bigger peaks with like Conan and others like before that, but they were clear other heavyweight classes with us. So yeah, no, I think that Mystico, especially considering like basically that Flair Thez thing, basically launches Triple H to make like the biggest faceplant in his early managerial career with NXT because of Mystico 2006.
That's a good point.
Happens.
Yeah. And that is an overwhelming positive for him. So I appreciate that. I'm assuming this is where we're going to go on a separate path here. Number 9, I have Ultimo Dragon's 1996. This is the J Crown year. This is all the title belts. The reason I have this as late in the list that I do is I think its importance has waned over time. I think this is something where it's like, you and I can go to Vegas and go to a Dragon Gate show, and in front of the Game Changer mouth breathers, still the most over person on the show is Ultimo Dragon because they remember him from WCW Nitro and they've seen the photo with all the belts, and I get it. More power to them, I guess, for still being emotionally attached to Ultimo Dragon in the way that they were. But this is one of those things that I think the longer we move away from it, the less important it is.
Oh, I think the longer we get away from it, the more important 1996 Ultimo becomes. I think that I would have this probably, man, PAX 2011 is it I would have this above Loki on your list for sure. Without a doubt. I think that Ultimo Dragon, especially for like a generation of wrestling fans, especially with WCW in 1996 coinciding with the J Crown and all of that, for him, Ultimo's best matches are probably 3-4 years before this. And 1996, I mean, by 97, he's done basically as like a big match wrestler. I think that it's but like this year really like this is kind of like becomes kind of the peak of what WCW junior / cruiserweight wrestlers kind of are, is Ultimo 96, I feel like. And I would argue that probably like his permanence as like that kind of character, I mean, having that level of notoriety that, I mean, 30 years afterwards in Vegas and still like being like on demand because of him in that photo and him on WCW Nitro, I think that puts him up. Maybe I wouldn't put it above Liger's 94, but I would almost put this tied 6 with PAX 2011 for me, at least.
I think part of my issue is as I go through a lot of Ultimo footage, just for whatever reason, I watch a lot of his stuff. On a personal level, I always prefer the Yoshinari Asai era of his career to the Ultimo Dragon era of his career.
Mm-hmm.
And as you go through 96, there's incredible stuff there, but there's also some stuff that I think is rather disappointing. It is definitely, from a historical context, one of the most important junior years there is. When you factor in, I guess, what my rubric was, my criteria here, just from an in-ring standpoint, I think he's so far below anybody else on this list for that specific year that it puts him at number 9 for me.
Yeah. I mean, that's the hard thing with Ultimo. I think 93 is his peak in ring, and it's all downhill from there.
I would agree with that.
Even before he has the elbow injury, it's stuff in 1994. Because I remember like this Jericho match that he had that I was like really up for rewatching, and I rewatched it, and who I really came away impressed with was Jericho, not Ultimo, in that match. And I feel like by the time WAR happens, his in-ring actually starts to slide.
Number 10, you might have saw me make a change as we were talking in real time on this document here, because the number 10 that I had, I now realized was a dumb answer. And that I oddly enough, after complaining earlier in this podcast about 90s New Japan heavyweight representation, I realized I needed just a little bit more 90s New Japan junior heavyweight representation. Shinjiro Otani's 1997 is one of the more incredible in-ring years ever. He's got the Tajiri match at the Dome. He's got the Liger match in February. He's got an El Samurai match in March that's great. He has a bunch of great tags throughout the year with Kanemoto as his partner. He's got a Benoit match late in the year that is okay. He's got a decent Kendo Kashin match, which is very high praise coming from me. So Shinjiro Otani's 1997, I will put as my number 10 here, although I could certainly be talked into anything if I'm forgetting something obvious.
Yeah. How much is Otani, which I mean, I'm on record, like I am now actively going back to young Otani and doing a more thorough watch of this, but at least like our awareness of like the junior heavyweight scenes and everything like this, how much of the 97 is set up by him being the guy who gets his ass kicked all over 1994, 1993, 1995?
He's still getting his ass kicked in 97.
No, and I think that's like perfect, like bringing up like his team with Kanemoto, because as I've like started to really kind of look at like the New Japan junior scene in the 90s and like this like post J Cup kind of context, I like he kind of becomes like the guy that is like there, and they move up, and of course he leaves, goes 0-1 and all of that by 2001, 2002, but he kind of in this way becomes the bridge to like the junior stars in late 90s, early 2000s, and then kind of feeding into heel Liger in a way.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Otani in 97 represents a bridge to a lot of different things, because it is the thing that I think leads to low-key being low-key and Ring of Honor looking the way that it did is the late 90s New Japan Junior stuff compared to the early 90s New Japan Junior stuff. And so it's sort of a perfect middle ground for what we had and what we were going to. So that list, no Dragon Gate wrestlers, or I guess no, that's not true. No Japanese Dragon Gate wrestlers on that list. Nothing
2002
really.
Tiger or Dragon Kid might be the one, maybe.
Yeah,
like 2001,
maybe.
2002.
Yeah, because I mean, you saw my list. I had Shima in 2005 there initially, but it was like, yeah, I could put Shima in 2001. I could put Shima in 2005. I love 2003 Kenta. I thought about that, but I was like, no. Between him and Marufuji, it's tough to decide there. I mean, Kenta's better, but Marufuji is very historically important, and so I would love to have a deeper discussion about this on the Voices of Wrestling Discord and the Open the Voice Gate channel. If anybody has any names that they feel like should be mentioned, again, my list was Sasuke in 1994, Ricochet in 2014, Ospreay 2019, Rey Mysterio Jr. 1995, Jushin Thunder Liger 1994, Pac 2011, Low-Ki 2002, Mystico 2006, Ultimo Dragon 1996, and Shinjiro Otani 1997. There's a very good chance I'm forgetting somebody obvious. If I am, please let me know.